Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's ubnradio.com.
Hi guys, I am Sunny Chayes and you're with me today on Singing in the Rain, and always remembering that we do have the power of one, my little tagline. As you all know, or many of you know, I have been a seeker of how to really bring the message of gracious living on this planet, with our animals, with our plants, with the air, the trees, and really, really, what does that mean? How can we actually do it in the most integral, graceful way? And today I have three astounding guests. I'm so proud to have these people on my show. We will be having David Christopher, who wrote a gorgeous book called The Holy Universe. We are going to have my dear friend also, Dr. Drew Dellinger, who is a foremost scholar in for MLK, a social justice activist, and a beautiful, beautiful, inspiring performer in many ways. And to start the show, we have the co-founder of a gorgeous, amazing, impactful, and powerful organization called the Pachamama Alliance, which many, many of you know. I happen to know that you do. Lynne Twist will be joining us from Canada in about 5 seconds. And as I told Lynn, I'm not going to do a whole edification for her. We'll just dot all that stuff in as we go. So if it's possible, John, can we just go ahead and bring Lynn on? Yay! Lynne Twist is in the house. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well here in the sunny California. And you're in Canada, right?
I'm in rainy, overcast, but absolutely beautiful British Columbia, and they are so grateful for the rain that everybody's cheering. But it's just a torrent, and it's beautiful. I'm on Cortez Island at Hollyhock Conference Center.
Oh, so beautiful. So, you know what? I would love to just sort of dive in. There are many things that the Pachamama Alliance has done over the years, and then I always like to ask this question, what's next? And I feel like there are lots of what's next for Pachamama Alliance and for you personally. So, you know what? Let's go. Go on, girl. Let us know.
Which question am I answering? What's next, or all of the above?
Well, let's start with what's happening with Pachamama Alliance presently.
Well, as you know very well, Sunny, because you're a Pacha person, which is my goal for everybody on Earth. You know Pachamama and love Pachamama, and that's what we call a Pacha person. The Pachamama Alliance is an alliance between indigenous peoples of the Amazon rainforest and the Andes, and conscious, committed people like you, Sunny, and the people listening right now to the show and watching it later, for the sustainability of life itself. It's an alliance between indigenous people and conscious, committed people of the modern world for the sustainability of life. And our origins are deep in the Amazon rainforest, right on the equator, in the southern Ecuadorian Amazon, which is also called the sacred headwaters of the Amazon, northern Peru. And this happens to be this incredible place where we were called to begin our work with the Achuar, the Shuar, the Shiwiar, the Zapro, the Waorani, the Andoan, the Quechua, 7 incredible indigenous groups who are fiercely and boldly committed to preserving this most important ecosystem on this planet, and certainly the most biodiverse ecosystem in the Amazon, the sacred headwaters. And we empower them and work very closely with these indigenous people. And from that incredible gift and opportunity and privilege of being very closely aligned with and learning from indigenous people and supporting them in their stand to preserve those forests for the future of life, incredible wisdom has been gained by all of us. And we have invented programs which they suggested and actually mandated that we begin working on changing the dream of the modern world, changing the dream of consumerism and accumulation and acquisition and doing anything and everything we think we want and can to the earth to have what we think we must have next. And that trance we're in, they call it a dream. And the Pachamama Alliance is working to free us from that trance, liberate us from it, wake us up from it, and create a new dream, an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, and socially just human presence on this planet. And that's the real mission of our organization, our movement, the work of the Pacha people around the world, who are an ecosystem of pro-activist leaders. Pro-activists meaning people who are for rather than against, for an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just human presence on this planet, and not against anything, but know what's in the way that needs to be unraveled and dealt with in order to have that future come true. So we do the symposium. We also do the Game Changer Intensive. And that's what's happening with Pachamama Alliance right now. And we're very, very deeply engaged with all kinds of things that I could go into. But that's kind of the overview. And I know that some people will be going to the symposium this Sunday in Los Angeles, hopefully from 1 to 5. So I know you're going to talk about that. So I'll stop
Brentwood. Oh, no, that's so beautiful. And you're reminding me as you're saying that, just a few things came to my mind, which is the brilliant and wonderful Tom Hartman, who speaks about sort of the mental illness of having too much Wetiko, from the Native American here in America. And again, the message that the South is wanting the North to receive, which is that being rich is not where it's at, as we used to say, or some people used to say in the 60s. I'm not that old. But, to really understand the grace of living on with and, just on this earth in a way that just really, really makes sense and without feeling like we can't have. It's not about not having. It's about really having the gratitude for what is. Don't you feel?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the great challenge and opportunity and privilege of our time is to make a difference with what we have rather than accumulate more. And when you make a difference with what you have, when you let go of trying to get more of what you don't really need, which is what our culture sort of brainwashes us to want more of, when we let go of that chase for more of what we don't really need, it frees up oceans of energy. They're all tied up in that franticness to turn and pay attention to what we already have. And when we pay attention to what we already have, when we nourish it, when we make a difference with it, when we share it, when we contribute it, it expands. And that's the key to true prosperity. It's also the key to the sustainable future of life on Earth. So that's exactly what I think too. And you're right on target, and you're my sister.
Thank you, as you are mine. And I think also as you're speaking, and it's something that I talk to all the time about creativity. And, sometimes when we lose something, quote unquote, then one needs to get creative to figure out what's up. And I feel like even with the financial crisis of a number of years ago, it really, I know a lot of people, myself and hearing about it and feeling it, that people, got creative. It was like, well, now we're going to bring down walls. Different people may live together in more community. There may be other ways that we eat food. There, we save things more. We don't have the idea of single use because we can't maybe afford it, or it makes more sense to save that money. So I think that creativity is an awesome thing. And to be sometimes, as I say, when something is feeling like it's missing, it makes us dig a little deeper and just use our creativity.
Absolutely. In fact, I that reminds me that it's something that I love talking about, this kind of opportunity of the financial crisis as you just sort of outlined it, because one of the things that I've learned, and this really comes from the Awakening the Dreamer Symposium and all the work we did to put that together and keep it updated, it's pretty clear that right around the beginning of the 1980s, and some scientists would pinpoint 1987, as the year we went over what's called the One Earth line, meaning that we're now in global overshoot. We're in ecological debt. We're using more resources than the Earth can regenerate. So we're using the capital And that was when it started to go over that line where we're using more resources than the Earth can regenerate, just the human species alone. Mm-hmm. Now we use about 51% more resources than the Earth can regenerate. So we're actually eating the capital of life. It's an ecological credit card we can't pay back. And ecological economists in the 80s and really rang the bell in 1987 saying within 20 years we would have a huge economic crisis that would mirror the ecological debt, that we would go into economic debt. And sure enough, in 2007, as you remember, nobody can forget, we started falling into, in 2007, then 2008, a huge economic debt crisis. And when you think about how we've gotten ourselves temporarily out of it is by going in deeper and deeper and deeper into borrowing and more debt. And rather than getting at what I consider to be the source of the problem, and I know it was exacerbated by Wall Street greed and by deregulation and all kinds of shenanigans in the derivative market, et cetera, and the mortgage crisis. But at the very base of our financial crisis, our economic crisis, is the ecological crisis. We have forgotten that the economy is a subset of the ecology, not the other way around, that the ecology is not here to serve the economy, but rather the ecology is the home of economics, and economics is a subset of the ecology. And so as we go deeper into ecological debt, it will be reflected in economic debt. So until we learn to live within our ecological means, I say the economic crisis won't really be over. We'll just borrow more money, which just deepens the disaster. So I love that you're doing the kind of work you're doing on the air, educating people and waking them up from the trance. And it's a joy to be on your program.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. You know, one thing that I was listening to you were doing the, I think it's the bi-yearly sort of roundup for your people, which people, you can get that on YouTube. It's really, really informative. And you were talking about, which I'm also very excited about, the Pope Francis encyclical that's come forward. And wow, how powerful is that? And so you were speaking to that, and I was hoping you'd share a little bit of your feelings about that with us.
Well, I kind of got to call this guy the Pacha Pope. He's so cool. Francis, I love him. And I was raised as a Catholic, and I have watched the Catholic Church go through a lot of what we might call dark places, and almost like rotting from within in the last decade of all the abuse and the incest and the sexual misconduct of priests. And when you think about what the Catholic Church has gone through recently, it's been pretty dark. And this Pope Francis, in my view, is a reincarnation of Saint Francis, who, as you may know if you know his story, was the first true environmentalist. He actually shed all the wealth that he was born with, and actually lived with animals and plants, and he was a vegetarian, and he really was very aware that the human species is one of millions of species sharing the resources of this earth. And his story and the legacy of St. Francis really lives in this incredible man that is now the Pope. And the Pope, to me, he was born and raised in poverty in Argentina. One of the greatest things he's done is this encyclical on climate change and calling our common home Laudato Si. I recommend everybody read every single page. It's in paperback. You can get it on Amazon, or you can download it from the Vatican for free. It is so inspiring and so deep. And one of the most recent, miracles that came from Pope Francis is he went to South America. I think people know this, but I just want to mark it. And when he was in Ecuador, one of the smallest, least strategic countries in Ecuador, he went there really because it's such a critical country right on the equator, and this is where we live. And he talked about how important important the rainforest is to the Ecuadorian people, particularly the president of Ecuador, who has been engaging with opening up the Amazon for drilling from the Chinese National Oil Company. But the popes actually impacted the thinking of President Correa in a very, very powerful way. And the oil prices going down has had the Chinese National Oil Company not actually be able to pursue their intention to get into that rainforest. But I want to say something also that was so just blew my mind, that Pope Francis apologized for the 500 years of horrendous cruelty and abuse of the Catholic Church to indigenous peoples of South America, and asked for forgiveness. And that was life-changing, history-altering, groundbreaking. It was a miracle. So everything that comes out of this man's mouth to me is exactly what we need to hear right now from the leader of the largest religious group in the world. And I'm so grateful that the earth is speaking through this remarkable man.
Yes, I am too. And just today I was seeing on the news that he was also forgiving women who've had abortions. And I feel like these steps are so huge. And, you know, to allow people, even in this country, to understand that there are areas of mea culpa that we as Americans have not really addressed. Perhaps this might be an inspiration for, you know, again, Americans, for slavery and for, you know, many things that have gone on in this country. You know, that apology goes a long way. And in healing and connection and forgiveness and, you know, bringing humanity together. So it sort of brings a tear to my eye to know that someone out there who, again, is so powerful. And yeah, and what he says about, look, guys, it is up to us. Like the Dalai Lama, I was at his 80th birthday just shortly ago. And he also spoke about that it's in the hands of, well, he actually said it's in the hands of the spiritual leaders. He said the scientists have brought all the information forward for a long time. It's just like, that's already done. It's not going to be the politicians. It's going to be the people, and it's going to be the spiritual leaders. And so for these massive people to come forward at this time, I think it's no mistake. It's no accident.
Right.
Because we need it now. There's no more time to wait.
That's why your program is so important. You know, this is a tide turning time, and it's people like you, Sunny, and the guests that you bring on, and the power of your voice and the reach that you have, and people listening right now. It really is in our hands. And thank God it is, because we know what to do. We know what to do. We have the will, we have the commitment, we have the heart, we have the love. And that's going to power the turning tide and the pivot point. And as you say, the scientists have given us all the information we need. The technology is there. You know, solar is so available now and so inexpensive, and all of these other alternative energies, for example, and social justice. That's another thing that we really need to recognize is a huge part of what we need to bring forth now on this planet. So I'm so excited about being alive right now.
Yes. And, you know, another thing that you, that actually Bill, your husband and co-founder, mentioned was he was talking about the women, you know, and you are one, I am one, and it is true. I mean, I think of a baby bird or a baby or a mom bird or a mom dolphin or a mom camel feeding their baby something that has plastic in it. You know, it just breaks my heart, because I would never do that to my own child. And I certainly wouldn't if I saw a mom sitting near me at a restaurant or something and there was some plastic in the food. I would say, wait, you know, but that is what I think is I mean, women power. I don't normally speak that way, but at the same time, I think there's an important point to that too. Mother Earth, capital, both of them.
Yeah, right. It's no accident we call her Mother, because that's who she is. And you know, and I love that your program has the tagline, the power of one. You know, there's so many ways to look at that, the power of one person to make a difference, and the power of one being the recognition that I am the logger. When I write about how angry I am about clear cutting on paper, that came from a tree.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that we're all connected in this. There's nobody who's wrong or bad. There's nobody who's guilty and everybody else is innocent. No, everybody is involved in this. It is the power of every one of us and everyone as one. And when we really, really, really get that, then there's no bad guys or good guys. They're just the opportunity to partner and collaborate, tell the truth, forgive each other, forgive ourselves, and go to work.
Yes.
And that's the time we're living in.
Right. And the stories, you know, we all have our stories. And so, again, I appreciate sages like you coming on the show so that people can understand. And again, you know, what really the stories are and what we can do. And there are many little things that we can do that are so small that really are impactful. And just the consciousness of, you know, I'm not going to just have single-use products, or I'm just not going to take this and throw it away, because there is no throwing away. And why would I do that? I can do other creative things that, again, will save me money and will be fun and will, you know, it doesn't have to be heavy. It doesn't have to be sad. It doesn't have to be woe is Mother Earth, woe is me. And like you're saying, that I'm better, you're worse. You know, I'm a vegetarian. But I'm a vegan, you know, or what, all the things, you know, we just do the best we can. But again, I do feel that there are lots of places where we can all listen to each other's stories and learn and connect and know and get inspiration and education and ideas, creativity again.
Exactly. That's one of the reasons the symposium, the Awakening the Dreamer Symposium, is such a powerful tool for people to engage in and use to keep themselves awake and awaken other people. And then the symposium that's happening this Sunday in Los Angeles, for example, and other places around the world, just a half day of really being with other people and grappling with these challenging but beautiful issues. And then after that, the Pachamama Alliance offers the Game Changer Intensive, which is an online 7-week program. And the next time that it starts is just in a week. So I want to encourage people to go to the Pachamama.org website and sign up for the Game Changer Intensive before it starts, because that's another great thing that keeps people awake, gives them access to actions they can take and the education they need to take, informed, grounded, positive action that really makes a difference.
And in community.
Yeah, exactly. In community. Coming into unity, which is the source of the word community. And that's what a community is, coming into unity with one another.
Absolutely. And I'm so grateful and proud to have you on my show, Lynne, really, really. And I just honor you so much and have for many, many years. And I know that it just continues. And we will gather more and more people to the Game Changer Intensive, to the symposiums. And I hope people can understand that this is something that anyone in the sound of our voice and viewing this can know that there are symposiums all over the world, and of course the fabulous treat of the internet that the Game Changer can be introduced. I mean, you can participate all over the world, and this is the great news. This is the great news, again, coming together with Nepal and LA and Canada and, you know, like that. So, woo. And I know I have to let you go because you have to duck back in. Your husband, Bill, was so sweet to say we can get her for a short bit. And I'm so honored to have you on the show. And I hope you come back and join us.
I would love to. And thank you so much, Sunny, for all the work.
My pleasure. Bye, Lynne. Oh, my gosh. Now I'm going to quickly ask, because we're just rolling. Do we have Drew near us yet? Not yet. Okay, Drew, we need you to call in. Oh, my goodness. So I let Lynne go, and I don't have Drew with me yet. But I want to oh, yay. So I want to tell you a little bit about Drew. He's with us, and he's coming in. He is my very good friend. His name is Dr. Drew Dellinger. He is an brilliant scholar of Martin Luther King, things that most of us don't know. Drew brings forward. He is a social justice master and a powerful voice in many areas of environmental life, ecology, cosmology, and also wrote a beautiful book called Love Letter to the Milky Way, which is something I quote all the time on this show. You guys have heard me talk about Drew a lot. So now we get to actually have him on the show. Yay. Hi, Drew. Oh, my God. Finally, you're here, at least by Skype. I think. You have him, John?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So welcome to the show. Did you get to hear a little bit of Lynne?
I did. Very inspiring. Always great to hear Lynne. She's a dear friend.
Good. So, dive in because you're a master. I can be quiet now and just listen to you. So just speak to whatever you want, but, just dovetail on Lynne if you want.
Sure. Well, one thing that was coming to my mind listening to the wisdom that was flowing between you and Lynne is that we're really in a crisis of cosmology. And cosmology is a fancy word for the worldview of a culture, the story that a culture tells itself about the basic fundamental realities, how the world came to be, how humans fit into the world, what is ethical behavior, how do we relate to nature. All of these are kind of basic questions of what we could call worldview or cosmology. And when I was listening to Lynne speak about the fact that we're in ecological debt, that we're in planetary overshoot, that we are using more of the Earth's resources on a yearly basis than the Earth can regenerate sustainably on a yearly basis, it tells me that we're in a crisis of cosmology. We're in a crisis of worldview. Yeah. We can see it, so many places that we look here in California. We've somehow allowed corporations to dump wastewater, chemical fracking wastewater, into our precious underground aquifers in the middle of a drought. But even if we weren't in a drought, if we had any realistic sense of how precious fresh water is on planet Earth, we would not be behaving in these ways. We would never allow corporations to dump fracking chemicals into our underground aquifers if we had a sense of the reality of the preciousness of the planet, the fragility of the planet. Thomas Berry used to talk about how we live in a time irreversible universe. That means time moves on and things change, and the Earth can be damaged in its larger functioning. The time when all of these species came into exist is not the time that we're in now. If we wipe out all of these larger life forms, it's not clear if they're going to come back in the same way. I mean, we can talk about the fecundity and resilience of the Earth, and there's no question that that's a deep mystery, how resilient the Earth is. And yet, it's not clear that we would have the same richness of ecosystems in millions of years if we continue to degrade the planet at the rate that we're doing now and with the ferocity that we're doing now. And that's what my mentor Thomas Berry was interested in. What explains the ferocious approach of Western culture to the natural world? What explains the deep antipathy that Western culture has had to the planet? And he explained it based on our religious traditions, based on our spiritual orientations, based on a sense that humans were separate from the earth in Western religion and Western thinking, based on a sense in the Western tradition that put humans at the center, what we could call anthropocentrism or human-centeredness. But what it really came down to is a deep sense of dysfunction in our basic worldview, our basic cosmology, our basic religious and spiritual approach to the world. Thomas Berry told me once, he said, the pathology, he was speaking of the pathology of Western culture toward the natural world. He said, the pathology is so deep, it can have no origin other than a religious origin. This wasn't some superficial crisis. This wasn't some technical mix-up that we just need a better recycling program or better storage facilities for nuclear waste. But this was a deep, deep crisis. This is the insight of deep ecology. And so a deep crisis requires a deep solution. And so I'm reminded hearing you and Lynne talk that we're in a crisis of cosmology. And the movement for Black lives, the movement for racial justice and policing and in society is one aspect of the fundamental transformation of worldview that we need. We've had a worldview in the United States for hundreds of years that said Black lives are less important. Black lives are expendable. There doesn't need to be accountability when Blacks lose their lives in an encounter with the police. And so we're seeing the movement for Black lives as one way that this dysfunctional worldview of our society is being challenged. And so we need a cosmology that recognizes the sacredness of all beings, that recognizes the need for equality and social justice, and that can actually bring us into a flourishing future.
Whoa. Okay. Thank you, Drew. I barely know what to say after that, except, of course, I do know what to say, which is, first of all, thank you for all of that. And the second thing that I want to say is I quote, there is a poem that you have written that is very famous. It's sort of your hit. I mean, you have a lot of beautiful things that you've written. And I just want you to know that even though you wrote this poem so many years ago, I find the effect of it now probably more impactful, heartbreaking, open, and real than ever before. And I'm speaking of a poem called Hieroglyphic Stairway, which I personally call 323. That's my pet name for it. But what I want you to know, Drew, and we'll talk more about how to get at Drew's beautiful, beautiful poetry. But what I want to say to you, Drew, in this moment is that I say to moms, I say to people who are very religious people who, for some reason, again, yes, like don't get it. It's like, well, God will take care of the plastic bottles or something. It's the oddest thing. And I just look at them and I say, what are you going to say to your grandchild, Susan, like an actual person? In 20 years, what are you going to say to your daughter if they have like a 2-year-old? In 20 years, when they look at you and they say, what did you do once you knew that things were happening on this planet? And don't say you didn't know, because I'm not buying that. There's no way that you could not have known. So don't even go there with me. And when I say that to them, I see their face shift. I see their body language shift. And I realize I've got them. And I think it really comes down to that. So I just want to let you know that I do that. I use that poem to really, it just cracks people open. What did you do once you knew?
Well, thank you for sharing. I'm glad it's useful.
Yeah, well, and at some point, if we have time today, we might do the poem, because, I always ask you to do it. But that, and also, of course, Pope Francis coming forward, and I think that when you're talking about Thomas Berry and speaking about this deep, deep religious, gosh, I mean, I almost want to say cancer. I don't even know what to call it. I really don't. Because I find it kind of amazing when I talk to people, and people are so flip. It's like, really, it's okay with you to understand that, like I was saying with Lynn, that mom animals feed their baby animals, actual hard plastic that kills them. Like, that's okay with you, but you're a mom. I mean, can't you relate to that? And this sort of disconnect that I find shocking. And when Pope Francis came forward with his encyclical, I thought, for people who are religious, of course not all religious people, but certain people who are sort of stuck in a dogma and in a kind of a disconnect, and I don't want to look at that, and it's like someone else is going to take care of that. It's like it's such a wake-up call that, you know what, you don't get to get away with this because the Pope has spoken. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a game changer. I mean, I think it's a cliche, but I think it's the best word to use for the papal encyclical. I think it's absolutely a game changer. I think the number of Catholics on the planet, I think the influence of the Pope, we've already seen statements from other religious leaders. We saw a statement on the environment from Islamic religious leaders just recently. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it has the potential to make a major impact. And I think, one thing was interesting to me about the papal encyclical is the ways in which Pope Francis is connecting the ecological issue to the social justice issue. Mm-hmm. And I think he's got his finger exactly on the pulse of our times, in the sense that this is really the challenging work of our times. And I talked to Thomas Berry about that before his death, and he agreed that this was really the issue of our times, is how does the environmental issue relate to the social justice issue? Mm-hmm. And what's becoming abundantly clear is that our ecological issues and our social justice issues are connected. So we just commemorated the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina and the flooding of New Orleans. And so when we look at the flooding of New Orleans, is that an ecological issue or is that a social justice issue?
Whoa.
Of course, it's both.
Exactly.
When we look at climate change, and which countries are going to be the most affected, and which countries are causing the most parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. Is this a social issue, justice issue, or is this an ecological issue? Mm-hmm. Of course, it's both. Mm-hmm. And so this is exactly what the Pope is pointing to. And it was interesting to me that through my research into Martin Luther King, that we see that he was making these links between ecology and social justice 45 years ago, 50 years ago. King said it would be foolhardy for me to work for integrated schools and integrated lunch counters and not be concerned about the survival of the world in which to be integrated. And so King had a sense of the survival, of the necessity of the survival and protection of the planet, even back in 1967, 1966, 1968. So 45 years later, we see another crucial sacred vision and prophetic voice coming forward, that of St. Francis, who's again making these links. And in the same way that King was linking racism, war, and poverty, and making these links between nuclear issues and environmental issues and civil rights and human rights issues, we see Pope Francis connecting the ecological issue to the social justice issue and the question of poverty, and who's keeping track of poor folks, and who's keeping track of poverty, and who is working to dismantle the capitalist system. He actually did a lot of very stringent critique of the capitalist system. He didn't use the word capitalism, but he used the word the market. Mm-hmm. And he very soberly and strongly critiqued the market. Something like 14, 17 times in the encyclical. So I think that Pope Francis is one of the examples, as Dr. King 45 years ago. His voice and his vision and his words are more relevant today than ever. And we need to be those prophetic voices. We need to be making those links between racism, sexism, homophobia, heterosexism, militarism, poverty, permaculture, transition town movement, fossil fuel divestment, the Palestinian issue. We need to be making all of these links. It's like Gandhi said, I can't just put, I can't be living an ethical life if I'm trying to live my life in these airtight compartments. My ethical concerns keep spilling over the boundaries between these issues. So we've got to connect politics, spirituality, critiques of racism, sexism, militarism, poverty, gender, discrimination. All of these things have to be part of our moral and ethical concerns. It makes for a big challenge, but then it gets back to the fundamental challenge, which is we need a worldview that puts justice and the flourishing of the planet at the center of all our institutions, at the center of our concerns, at the center of our educational process, at the center of our economic process. And so if we can grow the counterculture and develop the counterculture to a point that becomes the culture, then we'll have a new worldview and the basis on which to build a new society that can flourish for all beings and all animals and all species.
Yay. You're not going anywhere, but I just told my engineer that we had to have applause after that. Drew, thank you so much for saying all of that. And what I want to say to that is, it is a tall order on one hand, on another hand, it is the only way. And to have all of that sort of connection that is disconnected, that is so interconnected, is crucial. And you know what? I'm really proud. Next week, actually, I'm going to be having Marianne Williamson and Dennis Kucinich on the show, and a very powerful woman, Christina Tobin, who's created an organization called, a political organization called Free and Equal, More Voices, More Choices, and really, really connecting all of these issues that you're talking about. It feels, again, very overwhelming, I think, to people. At the same time, It is also an aspect of just let's breathe. Let's just relax and let's listen with our heart, read, watch shows like mine, go to different things like the symposium, go to your website and see where you are, expose ourselves to the truth, read the encyclical, and just feel through what really makes common sense. If I'm going to give water to my child, I'm going to put it in something that I can sterilize, that I know nothing plasticky or anything toxic is going to go into their water to have them drink it. It's just common sense. And so I do think it's daunting. I also think it's the only way. And so I have Drew, and then I also do have David Christopher, who has joined us. And he wrote the book, The Holy Universe, which at some point soon I think will also be called The Seeker and the Sage, which is what I really believe this is. It's a story of cosmology in a way that's really some people moving through a story, which is what we're always telling is actually our story, whether we know it or not. So I want to bring David into the conversation to weave with Drew. So maybe, yay, we have it all going on.
What a greeting.
So, but before David, I actually bring you on, I do want to I want to tell you guys all something that's really, really cool. While I was, there are many, many groups and people who are being creative, like I was talking with Lynne about, and doing different things that are in their community to just make a difference. And Ricky Byers-Beckwith, some of you may know, is an astounding musician, and her music is really pretty ubiquitous around the world in all different ways and places. And she's sort of stepping out to do an environmental world clean music festival, and she accomplished this as much as she could this past weekend. And so I have her program here, which is made on bamboo paper, and it has the colors are not a bad dye. I don't exactly know what they are. But I do want to give a shout out to her, and I do want to give a shout out to everybody who is on board to do what we can all do wherever we can do it. And so I just wanted to say that. And David, come forward and speak a little bit, but Drew, don't go anywhere.
Okay.
Hi, David.
Hello, Sunny.
Hi.
Thanks so much for the invitation, as usual. It's a delight to be on. And
Thank you.
hello, Drew. It's been a while since we've had a chance to talk.
Hey, brother. Great to be on with you.
Hey. You know, and I must say that, as you said, Sunny, Drew's poem in part was a catalyst for me. When I first attended the Awakening the Dreamer Symposium, which I think you've mentioned a couple of times, is going to be in It's in Los Angeles. It'll be in Brentwood this coming weekend.
Well,
people can find out about it at Pachamama.org.
Brentwood is actually Los Angeles, by the way, but go ahead. Just so you know.
It's a small part of, to give people an idea of the neighborhood. And the thing that what really struck me was, I am awake because my great grandchildren won't let me sleep, and they ask me, what did you do once you knew that we were in such trouble?
And we'll let Drew actually do justice to it and actually say it correctly in a little bit. But go ahead, David.
And for me, and that in part was the catalyst for the work that I did, which really is about, as you were saying earlier, Drew, about changing the cosmology, changing the story, giving us a new story. And part of what I would like to add, too, is that it is so easy for us to get down on humanity, as if modern mind were some kind of evil, horrible presence. And we forget that the universe worked for 13.8 billion years to bring us to this moment in time, that we belong here. We are not some kind of alien presence. The creative force of the infinite, or whatever you want to call it, wants us here. The universe is so finely tuned to bring life forth that if any of the cosmological principles at the very beginning of the universe, those cosmological physical laws, were off just by a trillionth of a percent, this universe could not have supported life. So it really is acting as if it knows what it's doing, and it really is behaving as if it really wants life. It really wants Earth. It really wants humanity. So it could be that part of the story is that perhaps we're creating for ourselves a crisis that will allow us to wake up and to make the next evolutionary jump.
I think that's very possible. Yes. I think that's, again, it's always the creativity that, and a lot of times from a loss or a lack or a pain, something really, really phenomenal emerges. What do you think about that, Drew?
Yeah, I think we really need to stay positive in the sense that, I really always thought that Václav Havel had it right when he said hope is not, this kind of superficial optimism that everything is going to turn out okay. Hope is the deep conviction that something makes sense no matter how it turns out. So, I don't know how the ecological crisis is going to turn out. I don't know. I wouldn't presume to speculate exactly how the climate crisis is going to turn out. I don't know how our social justice challenges are going to turn out or be resolved, but I know for sure that it makes sense to work for a flourishing planet, to work for justice, to work for the community of all species, no matter how it turns out. And particularly because history and reality is mysterious, and we do see breakthroughs at unexpected times. We saw a civil rights movement that fundamentally transformed this country in less than a decade, and broke down an apartheid system that had been in place for many, many decades. So I think we need to stay really humble and really open to the possibilities of the unexpected breakthroughs.
Thank you. And you know what, David, you loved that I found this. I was at Michael Beckwith's house, and he wrote something in actually Ricky's what she calls it so cool. It's Newsline, and this is going to become one of our mantras, I think, where he says it's time to leap. Excuse me, I'm going to start that over. It's time to leap off the meditation cushion and into the streets with a message that elevates the collective consciousness. Each of us is a light of peace, compassion, justice, and unconditional love. And so what I love about that is it really is sort of encompasses my sort of story with dancing in the streets, ending my shows, which I used to do, and I may do that again, which is, as you know, Drew, a civil rights anthem, back in the 60s, and starting it with Singing in the Rain. But really, come on, people. So I feel like David, Andrew, and Lynn, who was on earlier, and I know I feel that way, is that this is not a complacent time. This is a leap off the meditation cushion and into the streets.
Well, and the other point too is that, and Michael's quote hints at this, that this is not about a drudgery. This is not about, we've got to do this. This is about finding your deepest potential, what brings you the most alive, and bringing that into the world in a way that you're helping the world in ways that really is fun and meaningful. This is about awakening the deepest potentials within ourselves, both individually and collectively. So this is the way I am, and still, and it's hard to look at some of the facts and not sometimes get down on it. But it's still, I'm becoming more and more at ease with the reality that, yes, it feels dire, and yet perhaps this is what's calling us to our highest potential. And we're not alone. There are so many allies out there who are waiting for us, who are willing to help us, who are willing to say, no, you're not alone, that there is something more, which is part of what the Awakening the Dreamer and the Game Changer Intensive programs are about, as far as the Pachamama Alliance's programs are concerned.
I see. Yes, absolutely. And I'll be at the symposium this Sunday. Drew, we have about 3 minutes left, and so I want to sort of hand the baton to you a little bit. I want to have you do whatever you want to do. Actually, if you want to do a little bit of promotion, if you also want to do a little bit of hieroglyphic stairway, I'm handing it to you.
Okay, sure. Well, I'll just quickly tell folks that I'm going to be on a tour of the UK through the month of September. So I'm going to be at Findhorn doing something on September 14th and 15th. And if folks want to tune in, they can watch the live stream of my keynote evening address, which is going to be called A Connection on the Findhorn Live website. And then I'll be at Schumacher College teaching a 5-day course, and then I'll be at the Plant Consciousness Conference in London. So that's going to be the UK tour 2015. But the thought that I'll leave you with, and then I'll read a little bit of the poem just very quickly, is that, Thomas Berry said that ecology is functional cosmology. Ecology is functional cosmology. So when your worldview, when your cosmology is functional, then you have ecology. Then you have functioning day-to-day practice, and you have the maintenance of the planetary system that supports your existence. But since we have a dysfunctional worldview, we have an ecological crisis. So I think the connection between worldview and the ecological situation of the planet is very intimate, and that we need a sense of how to connect ecology, social justice, and cosmology. We need to create a new cultural dream. We need to weave a new cultural story. We need to enact new cultural practices. And so I think this is going to take movement building. It's going to take the arts. It's going to take spiritual practice and interpersonal relationship building. But I do think we need to come together in collective movements and direct action movements. So I do think that people need to look for ways to get involved.
Yes,
It
yes.
can feel daunting, but as James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So now is
Yeah.
one of those historical moments where we're having to face a lot of the residue of the past, a lot of the legacy of the past, a lot of the dysfunctional environmental practices and racist, sexist, oppressive practices of the past. But it's got to be joyful work. It's our joy cannot be rooted in the denial of suffering, said Ram Dass. It has to be rooted in what is. So there's nothing joyful about denial. And so when we start to face these issues, we can begin to crack through denial and build our joy on a solid foundation.
Whoa. So I'm going to tell you really quickly that you are with me singing in the rain. My engineer's telling me we're almost off the air. This is Sunny Chayes. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook and all those kinds of ways. Definitely go to Drew Dellinger's website. That's Dellinger. David Christopher, The Holy Universe. And I'm going to let Drew take us out with Hieroglyphic Stairway. Bless you all. Thank you for everything you do. And we're going to go out to It's 3:23.
It's 3:23 in the morning, and I'm awake because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unraveling? Surely you did something when the seasons started failing, as the mammals, reptiles, birds were all dying. Did you fill the streets with protest when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew?
And we're off. Bye, guys. Until next time, this is Sunny Chayes, and I love you all. And just remember, you do have the power of one. Bye-bye for now.